Hi guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today. Now today we're going to go over all the books that I read in September. So in September I read a total of 7 books, which equaled out to a total of 3,091 pages, and my average rating for the month was 3.63. Now my perspective of my thoughts throughout this month was I didn't get to read all the books that I wanted to read, but I feel like I found some books in this month that were little gems, and I'm glad that I got to read them. And I am surprised that I read so many books. I was pushing it at the end of the month to finish one of the trilogies that I was reading, but ultimately I did finish it, and it's going to be in this wrap up. So without further ado, let's get into the books that I read. So the first book I read in September was Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young, and I rated this book 5 stars. This book basically follows our characters Win and Bo, and they have a one night stand at a Halloween party, and it ends up in an accidental pregnancy, and they end up trying to sort out what that means for them and the future of their friendship / relationship. So in this book we have a lot of disability representation, and it's done so well. So before I go too far into that, our characters the main character has a limb difference, and the love interest has a prosthetic limb on his leg. So I, going into this book, expected good things from it because I heard that the author also had a limb difference similar to the character. And having the author's note at the start of this book really opened my mind up to exactly what was going through the author's mind writing this book, because of her personal experiences having a baby when she has a limb difference, and everyone else's perspective and her perspective of herself, as far as people saying, oh, they'll be a handful, or you'll need 2 arms, or anything like that, and her going, well, I only really have the one, and worrying about it and being anxious about it. And going into this book, reading that author's note, just made it such a better experience. I was connected to the character from word go, and from there I was just hooked to all of the characters in this book, but especially the main 2 characters that we're following. The way that the characters were thoughtful of each other and each other's disabilities was really perfect for me, because just having them notice things that made the other one uncomfortable, or it was painful for the other one to hear or go through, and then being mindful of that and literally catering what they're doing to be respectful of that other person was really good for me. It actually got me close to tears a fair few times, because it's just, that's my love language. Having people being respectful of you and knowing who you are without having to ask questions, without having to say anything, and just doing things to help that are just kind little gestures that you don't expect, but they're really meaningful when they happen. Having these sort of perspectives from disabled characters, I also liked the conversation around outside perspectives. So people that don't struggle day to day with things like this, and like able-bodied people, for example, who don't understand what it's like when someone says to them things like, oh, you're so young to have gone through this, you must be so strong, you're so brave, you must find things easier because people give them to you, people must be more respectful of your boundaries because of this, you have it easy because like everyone cares, or like stuff like that, and how that affects a person who is going through stuff like this. Like if someone comes up to me and says, oh, but you're so young, my automatic response is, I'm used to it. I've had it my whole life. That's my automatic response. And having the conversation where people that are able-bodied and don't understand these feelings can read this book and to a certain extent understand what goes through our heads when things are said to us, and what goes through our head when people have certain reactions even. And there's also things that if you're able-bodied, you would not understand the references that they're saying. And it's like little Easter eggs for me and for other people with like prosthetic limbs, limb differences, disabilities in general, to read and give a little giggle, because it's like only we would understand that sort of thing. I just love this book so much. This has definitely made it to my top books of the year. There is no doubt about it. The chemistry between the characters was undeniable. The relationship that they developed was realistic. It wasn't just straight, oh, we're in love and we're having a baby and we should be like really connected straight away. It wasn't that. It was almost like people holding themselves back, not understanding what other people are thinking about certain situations, but trying their best to understand, and thinking that the other person doesn't feel the same way, or trying not to put pressure on the other person. It's so realistic of things happening in this situation that I just loved this book so much. Like, the characters, the writing, everything is so good. And I honestly can't wait to read more of her books. I know that not all of her books have disability representation, especially the next book in this series, but that's okay, because I still liked the writing and I like the humor. Like, I liked these characters instantly, not because I understood where she was coming from writing them, but also because the main character was just funny, and I related to her like awkwardly saying something and everyone going silent, or everyone just ignoring something that she said off like a whim. I just related to her so much, and I had such a good time. And yeah, I don't have much more to say about this book. I just loved it so much. 5 stars, 5 stars. Everything. Just amazing. The next book I read was The Project by Courtney Summers. Now, I read this as part of my local book club, and I rated this one 3 stars. So basically, this is following 3 different timelines with 2 sisters. There's a car accident that kills the parents, and one of the sisters was in the car at the time, and she's now basically in a coma, and they don't believe that she's going to wake up. And so it leaves this older sister on her own trying to figure out what's happening. And then we enter the leader of the Unity Project that comes in and basically in front of the older sister seems to heal her sister. And she leaves her sister there in the hospital and joins the Unity Project. Now, I can acknowledge that this book was written well, and it was written in a way that made you sympathize with the characters a lot more and relate to their feelings and what they were doing because of those feelings. But I, going to this book, as soon as I found out there was a cult, I knew that my enjoyment might not be as good as I was hoping, because when it gets to cults in books, I get a bit, I don't really want to read about it, because you sort of know the outcome. There's always the same sort of outcome, in my opinion. And this one was very predictable in what the ending was going to be as I was reading it. Yes, I was connected to the characters, but I feel like it was missing something. I don't know whether it was because it was YA, like young adult, and whether it was written for young adults, but I was missing, there was like a disconnect with it that made me like, I wanted to be gaslit like the main character was being gaslit. I wanted to feel what she was feeling. I wanted to know why she made certain decisions under the impression of these people, because without that, you're just sitting here thinking she's an idiot. Why is she doing all these things? Like, how could she make that decision when she's been thinking this the whole time? So there's just a certain disconnect in that. But in me saying it's YA as well, it had a lot of themes that you don't expect from a YA. Like, it had a lot of sexual themes happening and a lot of certain violent things happening that you wouldn't expect in a YA novel. So in that, it didn't feel like it. It was just the writing that felt like it. So I was a little bit confused in that. But again, like I said, the writing kept pulling me back in. So the writing was good, and it kept capturing the attention. Like, you kept wanting to know what's going to happen next. But when we got to the ending, and the whole book club thought this, when we got to the ending, it just didn't hit, because we had a whole time skip, and then everything was perfect and okay and lovely, la-di-da, butterflies, everything. And I don't know whether that was on purpose. Like, clearly it was on purpose, otherwise it wouldn't have been written that way. but you're basically left wondering how that happened. And it's almost to the point that it was unbelievable that it happened. So I don't know how I feel about it after that. Like, I was a bit conflicted. So I rated it a 3 stars, directly in the middle. It wasn't a bad book. I just wish there was more. Like, I'm the sort of person that predicts things really easy in these sorts of books. And it is hard to surprise me, but I just expected a little bit more. I wanted to be gaslit, to put it in a nice way. I wanted to feel like I was going down the same rabbit hole, and I just didn't feel that, unfortunately. So yeah, it just didn't hit as hard as I would have liked it to. But again, like I said, I don't typically like cult-like books because they are very predictable to me, because they all end in the same sorts of ways. So the next book I read was Guild by Revan Kennedy, and I rated this one 2.5 stars. This is basically a King Midas retelling, and we're following Oren, who is gold touched by King Midas. So her skin, hair, everything but her teeth and her eyes is golden. I say it like that because it was repeated over 10, maybe 20 times that every part of her is golden except her teeth and her eyes, the whites of her eyes. So yeah, that's why I said it like that. But she's basically living in King Midas's palace, and she's basically living in a cage. Like, there's a cage that goes between all the rooms, and so she walks through this cage, and this is where she lives. She doesn't really get let out of the cage. It's only like once or twice that she has been let out of the cage. And we're going into this book straight head diving in to some very triggering parts. This whole book was unfortunately just full of disgusting men and a lot of sexual violence for, in my opinion, no reason. So I was warned, don't get me wrong, I was warned, but the amount of close calls that the main character had, I honestly just was stressed out through the whole book, because I'm like, is it going to happen now? I need to prepare myself mentally. And then it didn't happen, and I was like, okay, now I'm just stressed. When's it going to happen? And you're just sort of gritting your teeth until the scene that you really don't want to read happens, and you can get past it. It never really happened to her. It happened to everyone else. So there was majority of this book where I had to place the book down a little bit, not because it was traumatizing and triggering for me, but because it was almost just too much. And I just wanted a little bit more of the plot in there. Once we started to travel, I was getting out of that headspace, and I was like, yeah, this is great. We're going to do well. She's leaving this area. But I wish there was a map, because I did get very confused on where we were going, the terrain, how far away the kingdoms were, the layout of the kingdoms even. I just was really, really confused. But when we got to the end, I can see how this is going to open up. So the reason I don't have much more to say about this book is because that's basically all it was just sexual violence, disgusting men, and a travel. And I just feel like it could have been more. I have heard that this book is the outlier in the series, that the rest of the series is really good, and the first book is just horrible, and everyone really rates it low, which wasn't a surprise to me when I finished it and rated it low. I did finish it in one day though. It was very easy to read, quick to read, big writing. It's just, there was nothing intricate about it, in my opinion. I did love the magic system, don't get me wrong. I can't wait to see how that expands in future books. But yeah, ultimately it was just too much. Just too much. So the next book was The Bright Years by Sarah Damoff, and I rated this 4.5 stars. So this book is essentially following one family through 4 generations, through trauma, secrets, loss, love, and healing. I went into this book knowing that a lot of other people had cried and were very emotional. I got through a majority of the book without crying. I was very proud of myself. I thought, I'm going to finish this book and we're going to be a-okay. Like, I understood the emotions, I got it. But that last line hit me, And then I was bawling my eyes out and I could not stop for ages, to the point that I was laughing and crying, because how ridiculous is it that I get to the last sentence and I just fall apart. So I was honestly shocked that this was a debut novel, because how did you, in your first book, get me so connected to the characters that they're like literally a part of me? How did you make me care so much? How did you make it just so flawless and emotional and gut-wrenching, and just everything that happened in this book? I loved the trauma that people go through, the healing afterwards, the secrets and lies that turn into forgiveness. And I just loved this book so much. And I don't know how else to express my feelings, really, because I don't normally read these sorts of books. I'm normally in the fantasy worlds, and this is a straight literary fiction masterpiece, in my opinion. This book is just so beautifully written, and I had such a colourful perspective on the pain and the feelings and the emotions and the world around them as they're walking through it and living these lives, and the changes in the world around them as they go through the trauma and the healing and the trauma, and just seeing through every character's eyes is just, it was just so good. And I don't know how she's done it, and I can't wait to see what she does in the future, because she's got her hold on me so tight that I don't think I'm going anywhere at this point. And that's saying something from someone who doesn't normally read these sorts of books. Now, the last 3 books I read for the year were a part of the Legends of Thesmar series, and I started off with the 3rd book, but I'm going to start telling you about the prequel novel and where in the order I read that and what my thoughts were of that before I go into the 3rd and 4th book that I read to finish off this series. So the prequel novel is called Slaying the Shadow Prince, and all of these books are by Helen Shearer, I think. I still don't know how to pronounce her name, but she's an Australian author, and I do really enjoy that she is Australian, and that's why I've continued her books. So basically this one reinvigorated my love for these books, because I have been throughout this whole series at a 3 or a 3.5 stars. It's still good, but it's just been a little bit in the middle for me. It hasn't impressed me. I can see plot holes, but it has made me enjoy myself as I'm reading them. So this book really impressed me and showed me what sort of writing that she could do. So I rated this book 4 stars, and it was the first 4-star I'd given this series so far. And I was just surprised. I could see the 5-star potential in the battle scenes, which before we didn't have a lot of potential in the battle scenes. It was very not high stakes. And as I've been reading the series, the stakes have risen, and it's gone from feeling young adult to feeling far more adult, like it's meant to. Because there is no way, with the amount of spice in this series, that it was meant to be young adult in the first place. So I'm glad that we've expanded on the writing, and the characters are a lot better. The characters in this book are my favourite characters in the whole series. In my opinion, they had more depth and I could connect to them more. I do wish there was more of a slow burn throughout this book though, because the way that certain characters forgave other characters and trusted other characters, I think was too fast. Not even putting aside that the romance should have been more slow burn, because this isn't a book that has like soulmates or anything. Well, not necessarily, but it's not you see someone and instantly. But this book was that in a way, but also with the perspective of what's happening in this world, I didn't expect the female character to forgive and trust the other characters so easy. So I wish it was a bit slower for that, but I understand that we were trying to squeeze it into one book. So I do understand why it wasn't as slow as I would have liked. But in my opinion, it didn't need to pick up that fast just so we could put more smut in the book. But ultimately, the writing itself was so much better in this book. The world building was fantastic. I do have to say though, I don't think, in my personal opinion, that you can read this book without first reading the Legends of Thesmar series. I slotted this book right before the 4th book, and I think that's the perfect spot for it, because through this series you get sort of little inklings of these characters, or these main characters at least. But until the fourth book, these characters aren't incorporated in the official series. And it fits so well there because I believe she wrote it at that point. And also the writing is at the same level in those two books. So I really enjoyed this prequel book. It did give me more ambition to read the rest of the series and motivation to get through it. So when I read the third book, Fate and Furies, I rated it a 2.5. I read it before the prequel. This book to me was just a filler book. It was slow and dragged out. We skipped a year coming into this book, so I felt a disconnect that I shouldn't have felt. And I thought initially it was because I waited so long between the second book and the third book, but I don't think that was it. I think this book was just a filler book with a means to an end for her going into a trial. And to have a whole book go through that just for that trial to happen, and yeah, it did happen in an amount of time that made sense, and the ending made sense for me, and the cliffhanger at the end as well, but the lead up to it was just a bit more lackluster than I was hoping for. It was actually a lot worse than the first book in my opinion, and the first book I felt a disconnect as well. So when I was going into the fourth book, after the prequel, having the reinvigorated motivation to read it, when I went to Shadow and Storms, it was such a better experience. This is mostly a battle. This whole book is mostly battles. And the fact that she's gotten so good at writing these battle scenes really made this the perfect sort of ending to the series. I was waiting through this whole series for the necessary violence for what was happening to happen. And oh my god, did she deliver on the violence that I wanted. There were some parts where I physically went, oh my god, I can't believe she did that. That is so bad. But it made sense because this war is not a kiddie war with people fighting. This war has like massive beings with shadow magic and wings and claws, and like they rip people's hearts out, and they get their hearts ripped out. Like, we needed the violence in this world, and she delivered so well on that. I did think at one point that the plot twist was going to be the exact same as the Throne of Glass series with the king, but it turned itself around and it twisted it out of there, and it did something similar but so different that it didn't irritate me at all. It was something that I haven't read yet in a book like this. I do wish that once we found out certain things about certain characters at the end, that they didn't then just disappear until the end of the battle. Like, they revealed themselves and it was like shock factor, and then they were gone until the very end of the battle, and it was almost like not too easy, but almost not hard enough, but it's not too easy. Like, it still hit the same. It had the same stakes and the same violence, and I just really enjoyed this book at the end of this series. Like, don't get me wrong, there are small little holes in these books that I did notice, but they're not to the detriment of the book, in my opinion. They're just like little time skips or little things that are mentioned and then not mentioned later, and like just tiny things that I wouldn't notice if I was really enveloped in this book, but I could ignore them and have a great time reading this book anyway. And the fact that we've had a prophecy through this whole series from the very start, but it wasn't straightforward. We had to figure it out because we thought that it was going to be something really obvious, and we thought we had the answers from the start. It really wasn't. It turned itself on its head, and I was actually surprised by some of the outcomes. And it's like it was obviously done on purpose, but it was like it was there to sweep you off your feet just as much as it was the characters. And I loved that experience with it, and I still don't know whether I'm going to continue in her spin-off series for this, which is following the sister of this main character. I think it's called the Ashes of Thesmar series, and that's following the healer. I don't know whether I want to continue yet, only because I would have to dedicate myself to a physical copy of that, because I'm not going to buy the ebook copy if it's the same price as a physical copy, and I don't have it on Kindle Unlimited because, like, unlike this series, this was trad published from the get-go, so it's not on Kindle Unlimited at all. So I don't know if I will continue, we'll see in the future, but for right now, I'm glad that I finished this series and I had a good time in the end, and I'm glad I could follow the author's progression in her writing so that I'm now up here having a great time. And I don't know, I just really, really enjoyed the end of that. So 4 stars for the last 2 books at the end of this series, and I think it was purely because of the battle scenes and how good they were. So they were all the books that I read in September. I hope you guys had a good September in your reading as well, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of this month. So far I'm going good in my reading. I've already read 2 1/4 books, and we're on the 3rd day of October, so we're looking good, but I do tend to start months out very well and end them a bit slower, so we will see. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of this month and a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.